All right, guys. So TennisCon 8th month, it's officially on their way here, and I'm so happy to have Will, Tennis Tribe. You're quickly becoming one of my favorite interviews. I think people really enjoy, what you have to say on doubles, and I enjoy it as well. So thank you so much for coming
Yeah,
on.
thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, and thanks for putting on TennisCon 8 as well. I mentioned it actually in my presentation, which people will see later this month, but it's just unbelievable the amount of value people can get from an event like this. Like, if you told like tennis players back in the 90s, like you'll be able to, get free lessons from Gigi Fernandez, and I don't know if you have like Paul Anacone on this year, but I know you've
Mhm.
had him in the past, and like all these world class coaches all in one place. Um, Somebody in 1995 or whatever would have been like, "Oh yeah, of course you can. It's like $10,000."
Yeah.
And
Right.
it like 30 years later, it's free. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah, it is lucky for everybody, myself included, because as a coach, I find that it gives me ammunition for the next, year. Really, is there'll be
Mhm.
so many things that people say where I'm like, "That's really good. I'm going to use that in my lesson with my student because I know it will help them." So it's good for
Mhm.
everybody. So if you guys are joining us, we have Love the Title. So tonight's title is How to Win Friends and Influence Partners from the famous book. But I think it's really good because doubles communication is so important, and it's key to be able to execute out there is how you can connect with your partner.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I get, Will, over and over again is that, how do you create this chemistry with somebody you've never played with before, that you haven't spent a lot of time with, and but somebody maybe gets hurt or goes on vacation, and all of a sudden next week you're playing with somebody in the lineup that you've never played a match with. So you
Yeah.
got some good stuff for us there?
Yeah, honestly, I just thought of this now, but like that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, reading that book actually would help in this situation. It's such a good because I read it. It's been too long. I should probably read it again, but I read it a long time ago, and it's such a great book on how to like come to compromises and deal with like different personalities and different people. And it's more from like the business mindset, but it can definitely apply to doubles partnerships. So as far as like working with a partner who you're playing with for the first time, maybe you just met today, it depends how in depth you want to go on this, right? But the biggest thing for me is addressing as much as you can before you step onto the court. So we're going to talk a little bit later about um, playing with introverts and playing with hotheads and different personality types. And all of this stuff is going to manifest itself on the court. But if you can address it before you step on the court, it's a lot easier to deal with because once it comes up on the court, then you're prepared for it. You knew this was coming and you have a plan and you already talked about it. So obviously, before your match, you're going to talk about what side do you like to play, deuce or ad side. That's something we're not going to get into today. In general, I prefer people to play with strengths in the middle. There's a lot of common myths around that, and I've got other content on that. Um, I like to get a feel for people's playing style as well, especially net and baseline. So I interviewed Paul McNamee, who coaches Shea Su Wei, who's won like 7 or 9 Grand Slam titles, and is one of the best doubles players in the world. And one of the things that stuck out to me from having that conversation with him was how he really likes to have a player that dominates from the net and a player that dominates from the baseline. So if you can talk about your playing styles and figure out like if we're going to play in this one up one back scenario, what are our ideal positions here? Like, are you more comfortable at the net, or am I more comfortable at the net, or who's better at the baseline? And it may be the case that it's even, and in that case, you can just play, regular formation, um, returning and serving, and stick with kind of where you're comfortable. So playing styles is definitely something to talk about. Signals and formations is a big one. So that's something a lot of teams don't use. A lot of players may not be comfortable with it, but it's good to address before you step onto the court so that you have all of that down. You don't want to step up to the service line and be like, okay, are we signaling? Are we not? talk about it before the match. And then there's a few questions from Jorge Capistani's worksheet. He's got 20 questions that he gives to his students that they can use before a doubles match with their partner. And one of my favorites from that worksheet is after you miss, after you double fault, what do you want me to say? Or what do you want me to do? And that's a really good one, because what a lot of people do, especially first time partners, is they're silent. And then the person who just double faulted or just missed the overhead thinks, uh-oh, they're being really quiet. They're definitely not going to want to play with me again. And then they can get in their own head and it can kind of spiral a little bit. So if you can address that before and say, sometimes we have bad matches or we double fault or we miss easy shots. What can I do to help keep your confidence high? What can I do to help continue to encourage you? Do you want a high five? Do you want me to say something to you? Or are you okay with silence and you're content and realize that's part of the game and you're able to move on your own? But addressing that early, I think, is a super important key. And then the last thing I think is energy. We'll talk about like introverts and extroverts a bit later, but energy is something I've studied a little bit more the last several years, especially for myself. So I'm generally a pretty low energy person. So I actually like somebody who's like up on their toes and bouncing on their feet a lot and like fist bumping and giving me high fives without it being too overwhelming, because I'm kind of introverted. Uh, so I think figuring out your team chemistry as far as energy, like how are we going to keep our energy high? How are we going to keep our focus high throughout the match? And how can we rely on each other to do that? Just having these conversations before the match is going to put you ahead of 99% of doubles teams out there.
That is good. Couple things. I want to ask you what you just said there. You said that you're more of an introvert, more low energy.
Hmm.
So, but you do like to have a partner that's maybe a little higher energy.
Hmm.
So you kind of like that. You kind of like that opposite, but not too much. And that'd be interesting
Yeah.
because if we played together, that would kind of be the case. Because I do kind of like to be more, pumped up and move my feet and high five and talking. But I would,
Yeah.
I would, I would have to try and find the perfect mix of maybe not overdoing it. Like you like it to a point. Is that what you're kind of
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. I think I've played with players in the past who are high energy, but it's a little overboard, right? It'll be like the opponents miss like a really easy overhead and they're like fist bumping and yelling, come on, or like the opponent's double faults and they're like cheering on that. And that, like, I don't know, that's over the line to me. That makes me a little uncomfortable. Like, we don't want to be cheering for their failures. Like, if we played some epic point and they miss an overhead, sure, but that is too much for me. But as far as like, coming off out of a changeover and like, kind of jogging out to the baseline and staying on your toes and getting ready for the next point and high fiving and stuff like that, I like that energy because it helps me stay engaged and focused, which is a little bit more difficult for me since I'm generally a little bit lower energy. So
Hmm.
um, I'd imagine, like, for to contrast that, like from the opposite perspective, if somebody's a little bit too high energy and they're too sporadic, maybe they don't slow down enough when they're serving or something like that. So maybe
Mm,
I'd be good with a person like that because I can, calm them down if they just double faulted once or twice,
yeah.
and just take some time and reset. So finding that balance and energy, I think, is really important. And talking about it again before the match can help you find that balance and figure out, what do we need to actually do? What do we
Hmm.
need to physically do? What do we need to physically say to each other in all of these situations that we're inevitably going to run into during the course of a doubles match?
Mm. This is great, and I just want to first of all thank everybody who's on tonight. We're approaching. We can get to 100. I think we're in the 70s right now. So thank you guys for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and do this with us. And I also do want to point out that a lot of what we're going to go through tonight, Will has actually made a worksheet here that I've put in the chat already. So and I'll put it in through there. But if you click that link, tell them kind of what they're going to get, so they can kind of maybe even follow along if they wanted to now. Because I was looking at the sheet before we came on, and lots of good stuff in there. So when they go to this site, which I put in the chat, what do they get with this?
Yeah, so it's 9 pages. They can print it out and fill it out, or if you just have like a notebook, you can use that. Just use it as a reference. It's just a PDF, and it's got some like fill in the blank sections where you can answer specific questions. So a lot of the things I just talked about, like are you more comfortable at the net or the baseline, and then more importantly, how are we best together as a team? So like if you and I, Pete, like both like the baseline, the next question might be, well, okay, who's better at the net? Let's say you're better at the net. Okay, since we're equal at the baseline, but you're better at the net, we might try to set up scenarios where I'm at the baseline and you're at the net, because that's our best combination. Even though you're also comfortable at the baseline, you're slightly better at the net. So
Mm-hmm.
that's page one. Page two, three, we go over some forehand and backhand volleys, and you kind of rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. Do you prefer your forehand or backhand volley? And with that, you can determine different formations. And I've got examples in the worksheet as well, just for a reference, because some people might look at it and be like, okay, I know that I prefer my forehand volley, but what do I do with that? So
Mm-hmm.
I've got some examples in there that they can read and be like, oh yeah, that's me. Like I can use Australian formation on the ad side to hide my backhand volley. Um, so it's going to help you both get to know your doubles partner, and then also match up your own strengths and weaknesses with your doubles partner so that you can create a good strategy as a team together. So it's certainly more of like a tactical strategic worksheet than it is mental. And maybe we can share Jorge's questions as well. I know he's shared them with my audience in the past. I'm sure he'd be fine with it. And those get into more of the mental side, but the
Yeah.
worksheet is definitely something worth filling out before a match with any new partner, or even if you've been playing with someone for a long time. There's really a lot in here that you might discover about your partnership that you didn't
Mm-hmm.
know before.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. Guys, I put the link in the chat again. Looks like somebody like Tom Nordstrom and some other people have already uh, gotten this sheet, so that's kind of cool. The tennis owner though has got a good question before I go into our next thing. I thought this is pretty good. He goes, what are your thoughts on complimenting the opponents? Is this kind of negatively going to give your opponents confidence? Can you be too nice in a match? That's kind of interesting.
Hmm.
What do you think
You know,
about that?
this is interesting. So my college tennis coach never complimented opponents. He played professionally, by the way, so it's different. So, but he would never compliment them because he didn't want them to get any confidence. For me, I think it depends on the opponent. There's actually some opponents that you'll play. It's the hotheads that I guess we'll talk about later. If you play against a hothead, somebody who has a reputation in your league or in the local tournaments or whatever, and they are constantly getting into fights or questioning line calls or whatever, I find it's very disarming to them if you're just over complimenting them and you're super, super nice to them, because they're more comfortable in conflict and they want a fight. So they're going to play their best when they're questioning your line calls and when they've got you rattled and upset and you're kind of jawing back at them. So I just don't give them any of the bait. And if they question a call, like especially early on, if it's like if I'm not sure about something, yeah, I saw it out, go ahead and take it. And they're just like, what? Like, and then their level can drop actually. And if you compliment them, oh man, great shot, Pete, like great shot. I think it can disarm them. So I think it depends on the personality of the opponent. Overall, I mean, we're not professionals, we're not getting paid. So I think it's okay to compliment your opponents if they do something really well in general. But that's one way you can use it to actually like your advantage if you're playing that type of personality.
Yeah, you brought me back to a coach that we had that was just all about the mental side of tennis. And
Hmm.
he also said, when you when you're playing somebody and they're in the absolute zone and they're just not like missing, on the changeover, maybe you say something like, "Man, how are you like hitting all these serves? Like you're on fire."
Yeah.
And then lots of times they'll start thinking about I
Hmm.
guess I am on fire with my serve, and what am I doing? And often it can throw them. And I do think you hit on something I haven't really heard too many people say. I do think it depends on the personality. I think there's
Hmm.
certain people, I don't know, maybe it's somebody who's insecure, where if you compliment them, that might make them feel more secure in themselves, that, oh, I'm doing this, and maybe they continue to play well. So I think, like you said, it's amateur tennis, so I don't think you want to overthink this. But
Yeah.
if you did want to maybe play around with this and just kind of do a social experiment, it might be interesting to see how different personalities do respond to compliments, because I think you would get a lot of mixed results. I think some people would play better and some people would play worse, and other people probably have no effect. But I don't think it would be a fluke. I think it would actually be dependent on different personality types of how they handle compliments. I think
Yeah.
that's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Peter makes a good point here. Like, there's examples of manipulation which he doesn't like, and I agree with that totally. I mean, it's at the end of the day, if you're focusing your energy on like, should I compliment the opponent or not? Like, that energy could probably be better spent like looking into your strategy or trying to study their game and come up with a new tactic or
mhm,
something.
mhm.
I don't think. I think it's gonna put more strain on you to figure out like, should I be complimenting them or should I not? Just
Yeah,
be yourself out there, and that'll help you play better ultimately.
yeah, yeah. Well, good stuff. Okay, so let's do get into a little bit of the personality, since we kind of opened it up with the whole complimenting and how personalities might handle that. So, but we want to make our partner feel good. We want to feel good with our partner. So, how do you deal with an introvert? And you say that you are an introvert, so it
Hmm.
kind of be kind of good to know how you like to be talked to. And I think also, maybe sometimes when people are more outgoing, they meet somebody with a lower energy, they can maybe make the wrong assumption of like, oh, Will doesn't really like me, or Will doesn't want to be
Yeah.
bothered with me.
Yeah.
So yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to just addressing it before the match, and talking about that energy. For me, because I am more introverted, um, I do like to talk about things before the match, and I like somebody who they don't have to be extroverted, but they can kind of pull my energy up a little bit, like I said earlier. But if you can, talk with this person before the match and build that kind of camaraderie and that just kind of get to know them a little bit, I think that'll make things easier. And there's no like assumptions once you go out onto the court, right? Because one of the problems um, that people run into, which is probably why you get this question sometimes, is you'll go out to the court, you'll play a match. Hey, my name's Will. Hey, my name's John. You just met each other, you're on the court, and then all of a sudden, 20 minutes later, it's 4-5 and you're serving and it's 15-40 and you double fault and lose the set. And y'all didn't talk about what's supposed to happen here. So if John's an introvert and I'm an extrovert, he might just not say anything and walk over to the bench. And then, of course, like I said earlier, like I'm going to think, oh, well, he's never going to want to play with me again. And then I'm going to play a crappy second set because I think he's mad at me because we didn't address it beforehand. So talking about all that stuff before the match, I think is the most important thing, regardless of personality types. I think it'll just help build that chemistry a little bit earlier on before you step onto the court. A couple other, I guess, questions that I like to ask before the match as well are like, how do you typically, strengths and weaknesses is something people talk about a lot, but how do you typically win or lose a match is a good question you can ask, or what makes you play good or what makes you play bad. So if the player struggles against pushers or struggles against big serves or something like that, you can address that beforehand and kind of game plan around that as well.
Good stuff. I have a question here that we're gonna ask next, but I want to kind of go on this whole introvert thing. One more question for you is: was there anything that you've learned through being an introvert that you found like, oh, people are taking this the wrong way? They think I don't want to talk to them, or I don't like them. Was there any trick you learned that, okay, well, I'm an introvert, but I do this thing in the beginning of the match or when I meet the person, to let them know that, I
Mhm.
I do like you. I do want to play with you. Like, is there any trick that you've learned that maybe isn't in your normal kind of personality that you've kind of said, well, I want to come off good with my partner and I want to give us the best chance to win, even though this isn't comfortable for me. I'm going to say this early to them to
Yeah.
make some chemistry.
Yeah, there's two things. One is just constant encouragement. If they hit a bad shot or if they double fault, even if we haven't talked about this before the match, I'll say, hey, don't worry about it. We'll get the next one. I'll give them a high five or a fist bump, something like that. And that's something I'm sure everybody's heard. But the other one that people tend to not do as much, that I've found really effective, and I've gotten good feedback on it from others as well, is to take ownership of lost points. So if my partner on a double fault, there's not as much you can do. But if we have a 5 ball rally and let's say you miss the forehand, right? And it was a big point and we lose the game, I'll walk back to you and say, hey, don't worry about it. I actually should have poached on that second ball. So that point's on me. I'll take that one. And
Hmm.
that way I'm taking ownership. And that sends a message to my partner that, oh, Will's got my back. Like he wants to be playing with me. He is taking ownership and recognizing that like he's just as responsible and this is a team sport and all those different things. So it sends tons of positive feedback if you can kind of take that ownership every time they miss. Even if you don't, there can be arguments either way, right? You missed the forehand, so of course I can blame you for the point, but I could have crossed on that second ball because you hit maybe a quality return or whatever it was, and I should have looked for that. So there's always different pieces of the point. Again, kind of with the exception of double faults that you can take ownership of and let your partner know. Even if they do double fault the game away, you can walk back, and I've done this before, and you say, "Look, that's not on you. I missed that volley at the 15 love point. We shouldn't have even gotten to deuce." So
Hmm.
just taking that ownership will help build that uh, camaraderie and build that trust in each other that it takes to be a good doubles team.
Yeah, I mean, little things like this are a big deal, guys. That's the thing. We're so used to tennis being an individual sport that, and I know from being a tennis player, like if I have a match singles or doubles, I'm guilty of just wondering how my performance is going to be,
Hmm.
and so it can just be so self-centered, and the quicker we can really kind of get rid of that and go, this, if I'm playing doubles, it becomes a team sport. And the better
Hmm.
I become at being a teammate, then that makes you sometimes more effective than just hitting a ball that looks really pretty. So good stuff. Here's something, a question here. I kind of like this. Said sometimes my partner that doesn't like it or is scared of the net would rather
Hmm.
play a long lob game. How do you convince them to move
Hmm.
forward? What are your thoughts on this? And then I'm going to give you my thought. And then also I was able to interview Brent Abel, who's got like a bazillion gold balls. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's
Yeah.
unbelievable. And he actually just said something on this too. So what do you think?
So it depends on the scenario. So if they're better at the baseline, I would do things to actually keep them at the baseline, and I would try to get to the net myself. The scenario where that gets a little shaky is on your first serve. So on your first serve, you generally want your partner at the net to be cleaning up any weak returns. If they're scared at the net, if they're hugging the alley too much, I just say, I'm more comfortable serving in I formation or Australian formation. Can we do that? And it forces them to get in the middle of the court in a position where, yes, they're uncomfortable, but I'm going to be forcing more return errors. They might shank a few volley winners. They might miss a few volleys. That's okay. But that's one way on those first serves to get them more involved. Now, when you're returning, if they'd rather be back at the baseline and lob, that's okay. If they have a good lob, that's a very good shot in doubles at every single level. At WTA, ATP, 3-0, 5-0. So if they're good lobbers, then pull them back to the baseline when you're returning and you look to move forward. Because you're probably going to be better at the net than they are because they seem to be scared at the net. So those are the two ways I would approach that. You don't want to force somebody into something they're scared of or uncomfortable with. If it's a long-term partner, I would have them work on their net skills so that they can develop some confidence up there and continue to improve up there and help you when you are back at the baseline.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, I interviewed Brent Abel for Tennis Con, and if you guys don't know who he is, he's in his 70s. He has won, I think, 21 gold balls, which are national titles, and he's especially says he's winning them at a faster clip than ever right now. And he said that, and it's so reminiscent of how I was taught and how a lot of people were taught when, like, hey, doubles is a net game and you got to get to the net. And if you're watching even the pros play, one up, one back is a very popular formation. And so he went from the mindset of like, I got to kind of convince my partner that, hey, what are you doing back there? We play doubles up here, to really disrespecting each different partner's styles and figure out how can I complement that style. And since, Brent does love to be at the net, he said, this is great for me, because now
Mhm.
they're making shots and giving me more chances at crossing. So especially if you had a partner, I know maybe sometimes you're like, well, I don't really like the tempo of the match, but you're just not going to be able to enjoy every time you play your match that you're playing at the tempo you enjoy. But let's say your partner is really good at lobbing the ball back and forth. It might take you a couple more balls, but if they're really good at it, you're probably eventually going to be able to get to the middle and have a weaker ball that comes back and put it away. So,
Mhm.
don't always look for what they're not doing, but figure out what they are doing, and how can you take advantage of that, especially if they're decent at it.
Yeah.
So good stuff there.
Yeah, that's a good point. That in the worksheet that we linked to earlier, it talks about like net versus baseline, and it's such an important thing to figure out. So again, you shouldn't. I don't remember who had that question, but you shouldn't wait till you get out on the court to figure out that they're scared at the net. Figure this out before the match and talk about it before the match. And then you can create these scenarios before the match and go in with a game plan. We know you don't like to be at the net, so I'm going to pull you back when I'm returning, and I'm going to return and volley, or I'm going to hit a lob return and then come in, or come in after my return +1 shot, whatever it might be.
hmm Good stuff. So, guys, we're almost at 100. You guys are amazing. And so we covered the introvert. Now, what about the next thing that we want to talk about, which is the players who are a little bit of a hothead? They miss shots, they yell at themselves. Sometimes, even though they don't want to, maybe they
Mhm.
shake their head when you miss a shot. How do you deal with these people?
Yeah. So Peter in the chat earlier said, the same can be said of every kind of relationship, marriage included, when we were talking earlier. And I think that definitely applies to doubles. And dealing with hotheads, it is similar to like dealing with a marriage. Like if you notice that my partner's been pretty angry lately, it's probably better to address it early than like let it go on for months or weeks or years or whatever, and let it continue to build, right? So the same's true on the doubles court. If you know you're about to play, oh, I've got to play with John tomorrow and he always gets mad on the court, like pull John aside before the match and say like, hey John, like I know you're a great player, I'm excited to play. I know sometimes like you can get a little fiery on the court, like what do you want me to do in that situation to support you and to help you? And he's not going to go off on you before the match. He's going to actually take that as like a sign of respect that you're excited to play with him. And I bet nobody's ever asked him that before. And he or she would probably be like, oh, thanks for asking me. Like, that's really something I've been working on, and I'm going to try to be better at it. And that probably is going to reduce the chances that it actually happens on the court because they've almost like therapy, like they've had a chance to address it before whatever happens on the court does. So I think that's probably the best advice for handling that. If you mentioned like your partner's shaking their head after a double fault or something like that. Man, that's a tough one. You've got to do your best to ignore that and keep playing. Ideally, they should be encouraging you and supporting you. And I'm sure we have some people on this who have done that before. And one of the questions, you mentioned earlier how tennis is such like an individual sport, and we're brought up playing singles. And one of the questions I like to ask people is on the doubles court is, would you rather win the match, or would you rather have someone to blame if you lose? And you
Hmm.
have to put those in order in some kind of priority. You have to prioritize one over the other. So if you'd rather win the match, you're not going to shake your head when your partner double faults. But a lot of people, and they may not know this, a lot of people, I see it at USTA tournaments and league matches, they're shaking their heads at the net when their partner double faults, and then I'll be talking to them in the parking lot after, and they'll be like, "Oh, my partner, double faulted the game away," and it's like, I guarantee if you would prioritize winning the match over having someone to blame if you lose, then you might have won that match, and your partner may have double faulted a little bit less because they would have felt more encouraged. So you have to decide for yourself, do you want to be a team player? Do you want to win the match, or do you want to have somebody to blame afterwards?
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a lot of um, I guess, introspection and self-awareness.
Yeah. I think there's different types of hotheads too. And I think, again, the more you can kind of get better at reading people, like some people who are hotheads, and I find that they're the ones who also, maybe even during the match or as you get to know them and you're having a drink with them or whatever, they're the type that will kind of make fun of themselves a lot. I think they're
Yeah.
insecure. I can kind of do that a bit too as well, where you kind of play off your insecurities, so you like to make fun of yourself, but you can also get very emotional very quick, maybe to, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's an outward way of showing, like, "Hey, I'm upset I missed that shot," to let everybody around know, like, "I'm a better player than this. So, it
Mm.
really angers me that I just did that in front of everybody." Um, I think that can be part of it. So, uh, knowing that different personalities, that sometimes when they're yelling and getting mad, that you actually can go talk to them, because they aren't at all mad at you. They're not at all upset at you, and they're mostly really truly beating themselves up, and an
Mhm.
intervention sometimes, which a lot of times when you see that, you think, "Ah, I got to like leave them alone." And I think that becomes the art of some people you probably do need to leave alone, and that's why it's so good
Yeah.
to ask before you play, like you said. And some people you probably do need to kind of like snap them out of it with a joke, or "It's okay," or "It's the next point," or whatever you
Yeah.
can think of. It's kind of funny that so many pros who I've talked to who are doubles players, it seems that in very tense moments, they always talk about how they've cracked a joke, or how their partner cracked a joke at a very
Mm.
important time. And you would think, like, wow, you guys are playing for grand slams, but it is important, I think, sometimes to remember your sense of humor and crack a joke at a very tension filled time, so that you can reset the temperature in the room and
Mm.
relax and play. So I always found that interesting when I heard that from so many great players. Guys, we've done
Yeah.
it. We're over 100. That's amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very cool.
yeah, that's a good point. Like the hotheads are like everybody's different, right? Like so we talk about how do you play with introverts, or how do you play with extroverts, or how do you play with hotheads? The answer to all of this is, if you can talk to them before the match about whatever the potential issue or whatever it is that you see, and just create open dialogue with each other, it's going to make it easier once you get in that situation on the court. And I remember a few years ago at the WTA finals, I talked with Katerina Siniakova and Barbara Krejcikova, who had won 7 Grand Slams together. And Siniakova was the one on the court who still to this day, she gets pretty fiery and upset with herself, and she's yelling at the coaching box. And I asked Barbara Krejcikova, how do you handle it when Katerina gets like this? And they kind of laughed for a second, and she said, "I just let her do her thing. Like, I just don't let it affect me. I let her blow off the steam, and then I know she'll start playing better. So that's how they handle it. But some people might need you to walk over and give them support. It's just different for everybody, and you have to literally just ask them.
Hmm. That's funny you say that. I think it was maybe a couple years ago. I got to interview Stan Smith, so I was all excited. I did it with Gigi Fernandez, and so I was watching old videos, and there was actually a video where he is playing doubles with Nastasi, and you're just thinking, how can you have two different personalities? Because Stan is very much a gentleman and very reserved, and Nastasi, I know you're a young guy, so I don't know how much you know about him, but he was absolutely crazy. And in
Hmm.
this one match, he's going nuts, absolutely crazy, like beyond McEnroe. Like
Yeah.
McEnroe was a jerk, but at the same time, you never felt like, sometimes you feel like McEnroe's insane, but when you're watching the Stasi, it's different. You're like, this guy's literally like insane. And it was interesting to watch because Stan just let him do his thing for a while. And then he stood by him for a little bit. And then
Hmm.
very calmly, he just knew the right time to kind of almost take him by the chest and the back and kind of walk him away from it and get on with the match. So
Wow.
I thought that was pretty fascinating. Okay, so here's just kind of a bit more on that. Somebody said, I won't argue line calls, but there's some people you play with to where they go nuts and they're questioning calls and they disrupt line calls. I think maybe I kind of answered it with Stan Smith there. But what about you? Have you ever played with a partner that kind of can get super excited about a bad call and feels so wronged and just keeps harping on it? How do you get them out of that?
Yeah. Honestly, usually this has happened like once or twice. It's been a while since it's happened to me where I've played with somebody like that. But in the past, I've honestly just sided with the other team, been like, "Oh yeah, I saw it good," or
Mm,
I saw it out too, like it just missed." Because I don't want them to like go nuts over that. Like I want them to come back and reset, and it kind of disarms them. They like they expect me to say nothing or like take their side. Um, and I'll just say like, no, I saw it a little wide too. Like we're good. Let's get the next one. So I'll
hmm.
usually do that. Now, if we actually are getting cheated, yeah, I mean that's tough. Like if it's a tournament, I like to just go get an official immediately because it drives me crazy. One of the things I love about tennis is how like objective everything is. Like in this is a little side tangent, but in like football and basketball, right? There's all these human judgment calls, right? Like my football team loses. Oh, if we hadn't gotten that pass interference call, that was such a terrible call. But in tennis, you don't have that. Like whoever won the match, won the match. The ball was either in or out. So it does drive me crazy when people cheat against me. So I'm very quick to go get a line judge.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
but but yeah, as far as playing with partners who question line calls all the time, I try to just diffuse it as quick as possible and focus on the tennis.
No, I think that's good advice. Here, Mike Peters, who's come out to Cincinnati now almost every single year. We've done it close to a decade, and I actually used to teach him tennis lessons in California. He's out in Texas now. So, Mike, thanks for being on. So he says not playing so much with a hothead, but what about and maybe this will really speak to you, because maybe you've experienced this, an extrovert who's just very very talkative, and
Hmm.
but it becomes too much noise for a certain type of personality, like Mike is saying. It just gets to be too much. It's like,
Yeah,
how do you deal with that without hurting their feelings? That they're kind of like talking to you too much, and like, let's just ease
yeah,
off that a little bit.
yeah. I mean, there's some personalities you just won't click with. I think that there's not a correct answer to all of these questions, and this one, like, if it's somebody you're not comfortable playing with, like maybe you shouldn't play with them again. A few things I would do if I was like in the middle of a match like that. Uh, I'd take a bathroom break after the set and just like reset myself and give myself some like silence for like even 90 seconds. Put cold water on my face. I wouldn't sit on the changeover for very long if they're next to me, like chatting my ear off, and I don't want to deal with it. Like I'll take my towel and like go back to the fence and put it over my head. And you can ask them, say like, give me a second, I need to like refocus. So just find ways to like find some solitude for yourself, reset, and then come back, knowing that obviously they're going to be pretty extroverted and talkative. But I think long-term solution, you have to find somebody who has a personality that matches what you need in terms of energy and extroversion, introversion, talkative, all those different things.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, well, let's talk about the last one, which is the player that is kind of bossy. And
Hmm.
and I think some of these people who are bossy, again, there's so many different personalities out there. I think there's some people that absolutely know they're bossy and they even brag. They like, you've met these people in life, they like to brag about how they're the alpha, whatever.
Yeah,
And, that's the way it goes. And there's other people that are bossy that they have no idea they're so bossy. So
yeah.
what do you have for us on that?
So I'll attack this from both sides. This message to the people who are bossy, because this could easily be me, right? Like I study double strategy for like hours every day. So when I'm out on the doubles court, like I'm the doubles expert on the court generally, right? So I could easily just be telling my partner like, "Hey, you need to be standing there. You need to be doing this, blah blah blah." So so if this is you, and you probably don't know if it's you, um, you have to get your partner's buy-in no matter what you're doing. And again, to go back to the thing earlier, like this is just like a relationship or marriage or anything like that. Like you can't be bossy with the person. So if I think we need to run Australian formation on one side, I'll say, hey, it looks like they keep attacking my backhand when I'm serving to the ad court, and I'm not comfortable hitting backhands over here. What do you think about running Australian formation? So that would be where you stand here at the net, and then I serve from closer to the middle. I think that might help us. Do you think we could try that out? Like, is that okay? And just get their buy-in, have them say yes, not like, hey, stand over here on the next one because I need to do something different. Like they're gonna feel very like they don't have a say in it, and like they almost attacked a little bit. So you really have to use different phrases like, what do you think about this? Or what if we tried this? And just ask them and create that dialogue. If you're playing with someone who is bossy to you, um, I think this is kind of a weird answer. I think you have to treat them kind of like a child, because they obviously have like a big ego about their tennis and a big ego about their game or their strategy mindset or whatever it is. And you have to kind of treat them like a child who thinks they are the know-it-all in the classroom or whatever. And you have to basically feed their ego, because that's kind of what they run on if you want to get the most out of them for this particular match. So if they say something like, you know, you're not helping me at the net, like I need you to run I formation, I'll actually say like, oh, that's a great idea. What if we actually try Australian formation on the other side too, or something like that, to just start that dialogue. But when they give you instruction, the first response should be great idea or some type of yes, affirmative agreement. Don't disagree with them. And then say, and also, here's another idea.
Yeah, I just love what you just said there is that I do think it's important as one of the things I was going to mention is I think the most important thing is when you're playing somebody with somebody who's bossy is not to let them run over you, right?
Mhm.
But you also don't want to make it uncomfortable and contentious, right? Because that's not going to go well. So I love what you just said, how you agreed with them. So now all of a sudden their ego is like, yes, okay, I had a great idea. But
Yeah.
then you basically, with your next line, showed them that you are their equal. Like, okay, and I'm going to give you an idea too. And I think that that's very important because I think what happens is a lot of people who play with a bossy partner is they can quickly get resentful, like
Mhm.
and then they can shut down where they're like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to deal with this in this match, and whatever, I'll just listen to what they say, and but they don't come back with any of their own thoughts or ideas. So
Yeah.
then it's hard to create chemistry, and the whole idea of this is when you go out and you play tennis, you ideally want to have a great experience. But we've talked about how much this is like relationships, and if you've met a lot of people, I'm sure you have friends and you love all of them. Some of your friends are bossy, some of your friends are more
Mhm.
quiet, some of your friends are more like you know, but you still have to basically make it work. And I think that that's the biggest part of this whole lesson tonight is you just can't have the ideal partner all the time who basically you feel like they complete your sentences for you. So
Mhm.
I think that that's really important. And I think also if you are somebody who feels like, well, I'm the expert on the court here, like Will just said, notice how Will chooses to do it. He always kind of talks about something that is weak in his game or his style, and what if we do this to help me out? And I think that that is also a great thing, rather than going, hey, I know this thing, and so why don't we do that?
Mhm.
That comes off as kind of a
Yeah.
know-it-all and bossy, to where you're like, hey, this thing, we did this, since I'm not great at that, do you mind if we try it and maybe it'll help me out a little bit? And well, then they're like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, I would like to do that. People are a lot more excited to help somebody when they admit a flaw that's
Mhm.
hurting them, rather than just like be submissive to somebody who just goes like, I'm great and you need to do that so you don't screw
Yeah.
up this match. So I think it's really
100%.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, with all this partnership stuff, there's no perfect solution, and you can't get every partner you play with to be the ideal partner. But what you can do is become the best partner you can be and work on all these things yourself. So it's something I've had to work on, right? All this phrasing, like you're talking about, like over time, I've had to go from, or I've learned that like what works best with people is, let's say my partner's backhand volley is killing us and we're serving to the ad court, their backhand volley's in the middle and the opponent just keeps returning at their backhand volley. Instead of saying your backhand volley's killing us, I'll reframe it back to me like I'm not able to win these points in the ad court because they're a better, baseline rallier for me than ad. So let's play Aussie in the ad court so that we can expose my forehand. And I know you have a really good forehand volley, so I think you'll be able to be more aggressive on that side too. What do you think about that? So I never mention their backhand volley once, and in fact, I actually flip it and say, your forehand volley is awesome. So I don't even have to talk about their backhand volley to get the end goal, which is really to hide their backhand volley. But um, instead, I'm focused on getting to my strengths, getting to their strengths, rather than talking about their weaknesses.
Hmm. That is really good. This is a good one, and I will first say you need to watch Tennis Con this year. And Emma Doyle's thing is about leadership. She's actually in the leadership field now. She kind of left tennis, but we had her for Tennis Con, and it's a great one for captains. And it's such a creative way to run uh, kind of like your first meetings with the team. And it's really good, and it will help you kind of answer almost all the things that we talked tonight. It's really, really well done, very unique.
Mm.
So make sure you tune in to TennisCon this year. But we'll kind of talk about right now. As a team captain, would you advise for or against negotiating issues between partners? So you got a partner, and maybe they come after you after the match, like, I don't like playing with Susie because she does this and that and that, and then the other partner might even come, and but you're like, well, but you guys are like, this is the level you're at, and I'm gonna have you guys play together, next week, because that's still
Yeah.
the best lineup. Um, good
Yeah.
stuff right there.
Yeah, I'll echo what you said about Emma. I've had her on my podcast before. She gives really good presentations. She has a lot of years of experience doing that. So I haven't seen her presentation, but I'm sure it's fantastic. So definitely check that out. Um, yeah, as a captain, so I've captained a few teams in the past. There's a few things I like to do, especially at the beginning of the season, to make things very clear on like how I'm going to communicate with the team and what type of team we're going to be. Because I noticed before I started captaining all of the different issues that arose during leagues were very common. It was the same things over and over again. So at the end of the season, people would complain about playing time. So at the beginning of the season, I address it at the end of the season, we're going to be a fun team and everybody's going to get equal playing time. Or at the end of the season, we're going to try to make sectionals and I'm going to play who I think are the best teams. And it's, I'm the captain and this is going to be non-negotiable. If you don't want to play for us, that's okay. We're not, we're a team that's here to win. And like, I'm going to be basically the dictator of it or whatever. And there's really I've never had issues with it if you address it up front. So advising on negotiating between partners, I think I would probably want to talk to each person individually and then talk to them together and figure out like what's going on. If they can't get along on the court or something like that, I assume that's what tennis owner is talking about, or somebody thinks they should be playing with a different partner. Then yeah, if it can't be addressed and they're not going to play well together, then yeah, I mean, it might be time for a different partner, but that's something I've never particularly come across exactly. So I'm not sure. How would you handle that? What do you think?
Well, I do think that it is important in the beginning of this. So definitely watch TennisCon this year. I put the link. If you don't have your free ticket already, I just put the link in the chat. So I would go sign up for that tonight, because Emma's presentation was so unique and so good. And one of my questions was like, well, how do you run a meeting with your team without it coming off as like, people, they want to win and everything, but a lot of people also like, hey, I just want to like do something fun after work. I don't want it to be where now all of a sudden I feel like I got a second job being part of your team. But the way that she does it is so fun and so interesting to where it doesn't come off as weird, but it creates a culture and an open dialogue for the team. So I think if you're a captain, it's a must-watch presentation, because as issues come up, basically you have the whole team's buy-in on like, no, this is the team we want to be, and the team basically creates the culture, and everybody gets to have input on it. So if anybody all of a sudden is going off of what the team has agreed to, then it's easier to say, hey, like, this is what we said was important to us. You're not doing that, like, so it's easy to kind of rein people in and kind of block dissension, because I have been part of a coach, as a coach, when all of a sudden the team, they start to kind of rise up against the captain, it is uncomfortable. And I mean, player after player loves to come up to you whenever they can get your ear and tell you how the team is a mess and the captain's doing this and this player's saying that. And it just is the opposite of what you signed up for, which is fun. So the more the captain can create the culture in the beginning, it's easier to then have these conversations. So I do think as a captain, it is kind of like your job. If you notice, because you can't ignore it. If they're not getting along, everybody notices it. It's not like you can go, oh, well, let's just ignore it didn't happen, because everybody notices it. And then usually the person who's most upset is then going to want to tell everybody else on the team what happened, because people will see like, oh, it didn't look like you're getting along out there. Human nature is human nature. Usually at least one of those people, if not both of them, is going to go, well, yeah, let me tell you why that happened. And so if you just ignore it, it's going to become a mess. So you have to address it. You can't just let it slide and hope it blows over, because it just becomes usually a whole season thing.
It just goes back to like addressing things beforehand, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're playing with somebody for the first time, talk about all this stuff before you step out on the court. If you're captaining a team, talk about all this stuff before your first match, and figure out that team culture and how you're going to handle lineups and make decisions and all this stuff. So the times I've captained in the past, like I said, for me, it's kind of a dictatorship, and I make it very clear in the email, I'm deciding the lineups and nobody's going to have any input, and that's how it's going to be. And I'm going to get everybody at least 2 matches. Like that's usually what I say, in a nicer way than that, but people respect me enough to where I haven't had any issues with it in the past.
I like this. This is a funny comment. Now that I'm retired, I'm no longer a captain since I no longer have psychiatric healthcare.
It can be hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish all partners were like Will, knowledgeable about tennis and sensitive to the feelings. That's very true. Well, guys, do you have anything in summary you'd like to say? Because I think we had a pretty good conversation, covered all the bases.
Yeah, I think that this is an interesting topic. I like talking about it because it actually puts me a little bit out of my comfort zone, which is more, data and analytics and a lot of logic and things that are very measurable. And talking about, partnerships and relationships on the doubles court is something that you can't measure, and there's not like a clear solution like there is with tactics and strategy. So it's a lot of fun for me to talk about because I know how important it is, and it does make me kind of think outside the box a little bit. But I would say like the biggest takeaways for people who are listening are: number one, address things early before you step on the court, whether it's captaining or playing with a new doubles partner. And then number two, work on yourself first. This is a good rule for life, I guess, in general, but like you can't control what other people do. If you're playing with somebody who gets mad on the court, there's only so much you can do about that. So if you can study all this information that we've talked about and um, listen to the Tennis Con 8 presentations and check out Jorge's 20 questions and go through those, you can start to become a better doubles partner yourself, and you'll get more out of your partners regardless of what personality type they have. Because at the end of the day, that's really all you can control. And you're going to come across partners that are just not a good fit for you, and that's okay. And you can move on and play with someone else going forward.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on one important thing you said. A lot of players who play in league tennis between 3-0 and 4-0, so, for many of them, it's kind of like their first go around at sports. Some of them, sometimes it's their first go around at something team wise. So they get super into it and they follow all this stuff, and then they get frustrated that, oh well, no one wants to do this stuff that we're talking about on these live streams at
Mm,
tennis con, so I feel like it's a waste of time. They get discouraged. But then
mm,
that next level up, like a Brent Abel, I'm just going to use Brent as an example. He's got 21 gold balls. This guy is obsessed with keep he wants to get better all the time. He's always working
yeah.
on himself. He's a sponge for new information, new ways of doing things. He's a lifelong learner. But what he's able to do, and what I find a lot of the higher levels do, is like, it's okay if my partner doesn't want to do this. I
Hmm.
know all this stuff, and now I've played with all these different personalities and all these different styles, that since I know all this stuff, I know how to work with this person. So rather than like
Hmm.
saying, "Hey, I want to teach you what I'm learning," and that doesn't
Yeah.
work, or well, they just don't want to do it anyway, and they play like this, and I wish they played like that, so it doesn't really work. Instead of using that as an excuse, keep the knowledge going, keep growing. And the more you do that, you're going to understand, like, it doesn't matter who I play with, because now I know how to play with anybody, whether I'm the better player, whether they're
Hmm.
the better player, whether they're a power player, a baseliner, a certain volleyer, somebody who
Yeah.
likes to talk, somebody who doesn't like to talk. The more I kind of learn all this stuff and then implement it, it doesn't matter if they're on board with this stuff or not, because I know how to navigate around it. That's what I find the people at the higher level do with this information, rather than just going, man, I'm learning all this stuff and no one else on the team even wants to do it. So forget
Yeah.
it. So that's
Yeah,
my
a
one
lot of the
piece of advice.
tactics, yeah, a lot of the tactics and stuff. I know a lot of club players like don't want to think about it at the end of the day, so you might play with someone like that. But one thing that I've done before matches a lot of the time that might help people is I'll actually walk up to the person and say like, "Hey, I'm kind of a strategy nerd, so I like to run a lot of different formations and use signals and things like that." So, and I kind of laugh about it. It's like you said earlier, like I kind of make fun of myself about it. And then I'll ask them before the match, like, is that cool with you if we do some of that stuff? And then if I get overwhelming, just tell me and I'll like chill out. And they're always open to it beforehand.
Hmm.
So again, you just don't want to get out on the court and they'll be like, wait, signals, wait, what are you talking
I think
about?
that's what happens. I think that's what
So
happens. It's something that's not comfortable to talk about, and then you try it in a match, it doesn't work because you haven't even
yeah,
talked about that. You might talk about this, And they're
Yeah.
like, well, no one's ever done this anyway to me. What are you doing? Like, get
Yeah.
away. So I think I love that approach. Like, I'm a strategy nerd. Notice
Yeah.
everything Will said today is kind of like, I have this problem. Will you help me with this problem? So if you want to be the
Yes.
leader of your team, that's the best way to do it. It's
Be
like,
the
I got to
problem.
be the problem. Be the problem. Don't be the solution. That's awesome. So, guys, again, right here, you can get this cheat sheet right here, or the worksheet, doubles partner game plan worksheet from Will. I'll put it into the chat one more time for you guys to get that link. And did I do it? Yep, here it is. So make sure you download that, as well as make sure you sign up for TennisCon. And one thing I'm doing, notice I said it's TennisCon 8-month. So we're going to be doing a lot of live streams, a lot of um, videos that I'll be kind of giving as previews. So anything that's not part of the TennisCon 8 week, it's still going to go into the lifetime library. So if you found like tonight, like, wow, this is really good, we're not going to put this as one of the presentations for the free presentation during the week. But if you're like, I would like to be able to reference this anytime because I would like to watch this again. Any of our live streams leading up all month, even I did some a couple months ago with Will and with Jonathan Stokey, like anything I've done that has anything to do with TennisCon in 2024, I'm going to put it in the lifetime library for you if you do upgrade. So just remember that as you're watching everything leading up to TennisCon, which starts October 28th, anything that you like, it's going in the lifetime library so that you guys can reference back to it easy. You don't have to be scouring the internet to try and find something. It will be there for you. So thanks so much, Will. Awesome as always, man. Great stuff.
Yeah, thanks a ton, Pete, for having me on again, and thanks for doing TennisCon 8. Like I said, I think it's just one of the best events in our sport for club level players. And if anybody's listening and has questions for me that I didn't get to, they can always email me. will@thetennistribe.com is my email. I know somebody asked about lobbying earlier, which wasn't really the topic tonight. So if they want to email me any questions, I'm happy to respond. I read them all and I respond to them all. So
that's a pretty good deal.
cool.
All right, guys. You have a great night out there. Thanks so much. We're
Thanks
gonna be live on Sunday night with the Tennis Doctor. And then Marissa Johnson, who's great at fitness, is going to be on next week. And then we're going to have Gabby Paz on the 14th. Like the whole month is this jam packed.
So cool.
So I'm excited.
So
you guys have a great night.